3 DRS zones in Bahrain, so it was always frenetic, always breathless. But despite all that, there was a blanket of tranquility if you looked at the front of the race. You didn't see it very often on the TV cameras, but out there, controlling the race, incredible consistency on a pace that was well below his limit, that is for sure. Oscar Piastri won the Bahrain Grand Prix with complete ease. Superb performance all day by the team and by Oscar. I think his only problem was when they said, Oscar, don't forget to drink. And he said, well, if I had a drink bottle, I would, mate, if I could get some water out of it. Just a fabulous drive to back up the pole position he had yesterday. Lando Norris finished third eventually in the other McLaren. Good drive from P6, from a disappointing P6, from qualifying where he did. Helped in the initial launch by both Ferraris deciding to start on medium tyres, which gave all the cars around them an instant advantage because they were all on the soft tyre. But having said that, Lando blew it completely by stopping in the correct box for the start, but then creeping forward and braking again just before the red lights came on, which earned him a 5-second penalty. Quite a lenient penalty, really, considering the severity of his mistake. This wasn't just coming over the box by a couple of centimetres. This was going forward and then stopping and possibly getting an advantage. Anyway, 5 seconds is what he got. That was taken out of the first pit stop. He did well. He passed a lot of cars. He spent a lot of time, perhaps too much time, behind some cars, Charles Leclerc particularly. And there was one moment when he had to give a position back to Charles. There was a lot of late braking into turn one, a lot of running wide into turn one. This is Lando we're talking about still. Instead of just thinking that the pass is probably going to be on the DRS straight between turns 3 and 4. But he did a lot of passing into 4 as well. And he did a great pass eventually on Charles Leclerc on the outside of turn 4 to take P3. But by then he was never, ever in a strong position to catch George Russell in the closing phase of the race. And for me, George Russell's drive was one of the best I've seen for a long time in a car that was not as good as the McLaren. And in the final pit stops induced by a safety car, McLaren had the right tyre combination from the start. They started on the soft, then they went to 2 sets of mediums, a second set of mediums at the safety car. No other team had that. Everybody else had to compromise because they'd run out of tyres by then. Some went to hard, some went to soft. In Mercedes' case, they went to soft on George's car. And it was a big ask. And of course, by the last 5 laps, George had lost his soft tyre grip and advantage, any advantage he had at all. Lando was right behind him in a better car with DRS, with better grip on the medium tyre. And on top of all that, George was having to deal with a dash problem, a sensor problem, an electronic problem, which manifested itself first in the timing, where he's disappeared from the screens. And then from George's point of view, he started to lose gears as well. Big panic. He went into a default mode, got the gears back, no problem. Made the great comment, so long as the steering wheel doesn't fall off, I'm okay. But he was having to think about this. And at one point in getting the problem solved, it looks as if Mercedes had to open the DRS in a non-DRS area, or maybe they just caught the end of it when it was still open, or the beginning of it. And as I speak, there is a missive from the FIA demanding that George and a team representative go to the stewards because the DRS was open and in an area where it shouldn't have been. If he does lose P2, I think that'll be incredibly unjust for a number of reasons. One, he was just trying to solve the problem. 2, it didn't give him any advantage anyway. 3, the DRS advantage throughout this battle was always with Lando Norris because he was behind George. And despite that, he didn't get past George. Unbelievably precise and effective driving by George in defence in a way I've never seen him drive that well in defence before. Just absolutely superb. Never put a wheel out of line in the places where it was late braking or he had to get the car absolutely right on a turn-in position, turn-in point. And yeah, if he loses that place, then I don't like DRS anyway, but I will have absolutely lost any respect I had for DRS completely, because this is completely unjust if he does go. Just on the point of DRS, I still maintain that the racing today would have been just as good without DRS. These cars develop really good toes. You can run quite close to the car in front in dirty air. But more importantly, if you do a very good job down the hill out of turn 4 and a very good job through turns 9 and 10, you deserve to be able to hold that position going down that back straight into turn 11. You don't deserve to have a guy suddenly just sit there, get the DRS advantage and pass. That's not motor racing, and I've always maintained that. And I just think this was a classic example of why we don't need DRS anymore. The whole point of these cars is that they were easier to overtake. And for me, it was, and just to reiterate the point, if George loses P2 because of this ridiculous DRS issue, then there's no justice in the world, in my opinion. Anyway, as it is, he's currently P2 on the road. I suspect he is going to get penalised, but Lando Norris then will finish second. Still beaten by his teammate, though. And if you think about McLaren, the first 4 races, 2 wins for Oscar Piastri now. 2 very, very impressive wins by Oscar Piastri. So if you're Lando Norris, you come away thinking after Bahrain, lucky to get P2 there, or P3, whatever it's going to be, after what I did in qualifying. And he never looked as impressive as Oscar during the race either. Never. And that is now a real thing for Lando Norris. As I've been saying from day one, the biggest problem with Lando in winning the World Championship this year, in what is unquestionably the best car, is beating his teammate. It's not everybody else, it's beating his teammate. And just as a final comment about the George Russell, Lando Norris battle, when they were behind the safety car, just about to restart, Lando's race engineer, always giving Lando as much encouragement as he can, said, as I guess is now predictable, said, George is on the soft tyre, and he's already saying that it's going to be really difficult to make it through to the finish with any sort of consistent speed, Lando. The pace is with you, you've got the right tyre. In which normally a driver would reply, okay, great, got you, understood, or whatever they want to say. And but Lando said, as classic Lando, almost talking himself out of P3, well, I don't think that's right. I think the soft tyre was mega. I think he's on good tyres. He's great tyre. With no rejoinder from the engineer, of course. Absolutely superb from Lando. And maybe he did talk himself out of it. Maybe he kept thinking, yeah, those soft tyres, just amazing. Anyway, P4, P5, Ferrari. No match on the hard tyre at the end of the race for Lando Norris in the case of Charles Leclerc, but wasn't he good? Charles Leclerc over-delivering in that car again, just a class act, superb to watch. Lando all over him after the restart for I don't know how many laps. At one point he had to give position back, and then they were back and forth, but eventually he got him, as he would, because he just had more grip and he's in a better car. So Charles finished 4th, long way ahead of Lewis Hamilton, who drove pretty well. Got to say, it was a much more positive day for Lewis. He would have enjoyed it, did quite a lot of overtaking on the same strategy as Charles, which kind of was all about, we don't have enough tyres to do the right strategy, but he was okay, finished 5th, long way behind. Charles was as I say, was the quicker driver, but for Lewis it wasn't a completely depressing day as we've had on a couple of occasions already this year for him. So that'll be more of a positive takeaway for Lewis Hamilton going into Saudi Arabia. And then there was Max Verstappen, P6 in the Red Bull, which on the grid, you thought maybe all these changes they made overnight under the supervision of the FIA and Parc Fermé have worked, because he didn't seem to be complaining about the brakes. He was talking about, do they want more flap? And his only response was, well, yeah, the car's not going into corners, but I got flick oversteer as well, so I don't want more front flap either. I guess that was the story. And then on top of that, he did say quite early on in the race, I can't stop the car. So a really, really difficult 3 days for Max Verstappen. Very unusual for Red Bull to have some sort of issue like this. And it seems to be some sort of braking issue. They changed a lot overnight, sensors, brake friction material, all that sort of stuff. Nothing seemed to make any difference. And they can't get on top of that. And as well, 2 slow pit stops for Max Verstappen. Let me repeat that. Red Bull making 2 slow pit stops for Max Verstappen. I don't think that's ever happened. 2 stops in one race, both of them disastrous. The first was a problem with the signal light, where the driver has to wait until he sees that it's clear on the light, and the light, something went wrong with the lighting system, and Max had to wait a couple of seconds in addition. And then the right front jammed as well. Interesting, isn't it? Jonathan Wheatley is now at Sauber, and you wonder whether there's a bit of an effect here of Jonathan Wheatley. I've always found Jonathan a classic sort of English team manager type guy, very easy to talk to, friendly when nothing's going on. But the minute he's focused on something, he's very, very sharp, very, very disciplined. And I wonder whether that's something that Red Bull are now missing, because he's been there for many years, or was there for many years, and the pit work at Red Bull was always second to none. Now it looks sloppy. Well, it was sloppy in Bahrain, no doubt about it, and Max will not be pleased about that at all. Driving a car that bad, every tenth of a second matters, and when you blow all that time in 2 basic pit stop mistakes like that, then it's really bad. And from the second one, he rejoined in 20th place. Can you believe? Max Verstappen, winner of the Japanese Grand Prix, rejoining after his second pit stop, which was a bit early, got to say, because they put him on the hard tyre from the soft at the start, because the hard just went nowhere. So they brought him in relatively early to put him on a set of mediums. But even so, down to P20 mid-race. Of course, that didn't help, because not long afterwards, the safety car came out. So from Max's point of view, stopping as he did to get onto the medium when a lot of other teams didn't have any mediums. And he presumably had some sort of advantage going into the back end of the race on that. It didn't really work for him with track position because the safety car then brought all the leaders in anyway. Admittedly, only McLaren went to mediums, but the Red Bull was so bad he could do very little about Esteban Ocon in the Haas Ferrari, and he couldn't pass Pierre Gasly in the Alpine until the last couple of laps when Pierre really started to lose grip on the hard tyres. He'd driven really well throughout the race in the Alpine, and it was reliable too, mechanically reliable. And we didn't see it on TV because there's so much going on, but beautiful pass by Max. And he did exactly what Lando hadn't been doing. He was right on him through turns 1 and 2, just sitting there, not trying to do anything. And then he perfectly timed the pass at the end of the straight and got him into 4 on the last lap as Oscar Piastri was basically taking the checkered flag. And Max took P6. So for a driver who's been through quite a lot and he's won a few world championships and the car wasn't very good today, he's still hungry for P6 instead of P7. That's a good sign for all Verstappen fans out there, I think. Very good last lap by Max. Aforementioned Esteban Ocon did very well to score points for Haas Ferrari. And Yuki Tsunoda did too in the other Red Bull. He was kind of in the midfield all the time, being running into others. It was like that in the midfield in Bahrain. It always is on these DRS circuits like that because they're all in DRS trains, the tyres are going off. And in this occasion, most of the cars were all on different strategies at any given moment due to some teams having not enough mediums, some teams only having softs and things like that. So there was a lot of speed differential going on, a lot of tyres running out of grip in braking areas and quite a lot of nerfing. Carlos Sainz and Liam Lawson both got penalties for hitting other cars and a lot of that going on. And Yuki found himself in the middle of most of that, as did Oliver Behrman, but he kept himself very, very clean and finished 10th for the second race in a row. Oliver Behrman 10th in the other Haas Ferrari. Excellent performance by him, excellent drive, particularly as he had a lot of pressure in the closing laps from Kimi Antonelli in the Mercedes, who was super quick. I mean, he wasn't that far behind George in qualifying. And in the race, he was right up there in the early stages, ahead of guys like Max Verstappen, just to name but one. But here he couldn't get past Oliver Behrman. Really, really good drive by Behrman. And what was he doing down there behind him, though? Well, what happened was he was the only driver in this situation. But like Max, he'd stopped for tyres just before the safety car. And he'd gone to soft tyres. And I guess Mercedes thought, this is a big ask to get him through to the finish on this set of softs. So we'll bring him in again, even though they're only about 5 laps old. And they did. So he made 3 stops. And because of that, it dropped into the midfield crud. I think that had they not done that, I think he would have been good enough to brought the car home. I mean, at the end of the day, given the pressure he was under and all the other dramas going on, George Russell still finished second on the road on a set of softs. So Kimi for sure could have got a result too. Should have been definitely in the top 10, in the high top 10 probably. But because of that, it has to come under the heading, I think, of a Mercedes strategy error. Because of that, bringing him in again, he was right down there, and there's nothing he could do. DRS train, really difficult. Again, makes my point about DRS, doesn't it? What is the point of it? All these DRS trains. If there was no DRS, a guy like Antonelli would definitely have been able to pull off more passes than with DRS, because when you got a DRS train, of course, it neutralizes everything. I'm not the first person to have said that, but it's so ridiculous in this era in which we're now racing. These cars supposedly easier to overtake anyway. Why we have DRS? And if you really want to put it in perspective, of course, Jack Doohan wouldn't have had the shunt that he had in Japan if it wasn't for DRS. And now, just before we close, I wanted to just go back again and revisit the world of the GT40 and the era of the GT40. I hope you've been enjoying that story with me over the last 2 videos. Got an email from Patrick Head today saying how much he was, how many memories it brought back. And he was talking in the email about his early days at Lola with John Barnard and how Eric Broadley had been approached by Ford because of the success of the Lola GT, because Ford's attempts, of course, to buy Ferrari hadn't come off. And they bought the Lola GT design and worked for a while with Eric Broadley. And in Patrick Head's email, he says, of course, Eric very quickly decided that wasn't going to work, didn't want all this Ford corporate brass around the Lola factory. So he got rid of all that. But anyway, yeah, great. Thank you, Patrick, for that very nice reminder of those times. But I just wanted to do a reminder as well by just going back through some of the colour photos in my album, many of them courtesy of my friend Terry Piggy Malone. Piggy Malone, not because that was his shape, but because some of us might remember Piggy Malone from Ronnie Barker. But TV. If you don't worry about it. I won't go there. Yeah, he took these pictures at Sebring in '66. Not a happy race. Sadly, Bob McLean, the Canadian driver, lost his life in that race when in a GT40, a Comstock GT40, the Achilles heel, the transmission seized, locked the rear, went off, and the car somersaulted and caught fire. And there was another accident as well, and a very dangerous circuit at a dangerous era in a dangerous time, involving spectators too. But anyway, racing went on, and we do have these pictures, and the sun appeared to be shining, and that's the start of the race. Sebring, everybody getting ready for the Le Mans type start. You can see the SXY GT40 on the right there, the white and red, two of them actually, looking beautiful, and Porsches and Ferraris. And then Dan Gurney, who was in the Shelby American Mark II Ford GT, sharing that car with Jerry Grant, getting ready in the sort of marathon runners pose, ran across the track, but then the car wouldn't start. The 7-litre Ford wouldn't start. It went off last. Eventually Dan climbed in. And notable, I think, is that Dan was very tall. You can see there, he seems to be having difficulty getting in the car. And in '67, when he won Le Mans in the Mark IV, they had a bubble on the roof of the car so that Dan's didn't have to hunch his shoulders in order to sit behind the wheel. But back then in '66, he didn't have that bubble. So it was a very, very cramped Dan Gurney in that car. The field was led on the opening lap, would you believe, by Graham Hill in an Alan Mann GT40, red with the gold. Beautiful car. Alan Mann, prolific team owner and entrant. He'd already won a lot of races with Ford by then, with John Whitmore and the European Touring Car Championship. He had this GT40, and his driver pairing that day at Sebring was the BRM Formula One driver pairing, Graham Hill, Jackie Stewart. And there's Graham leading. But you can also see in the Le Mans start, the rush of the Le Mans start, he hasn't actually closed the door correctly, and you can see the top of the door, and part of the roof came away with the door. That was the shape, the design, beautiful design. Wasn't closed properly, so that was a bit of an issue, I'm sure. But into the Alan Mann pit, says Jackie Stewart, preparing to take over from Graham. Next to him, Frank Gardner. And there's Alan Mann himself on the left with Graham, just after that opening stint. Graham looking very suave and, well, very Graham Hill. All GT40 heritage stuff, this. Beautiful. There's the pit area at Sebring. A little bit rustic, I think you could say, but seemed to do the job, kind of. And there's Jackie in the Alan Mann GT40. Again, an unusual shot. I mean, Jackie drove a lot of good cars, but mainly for very good teams, and obviously they were both paid well to do this. Jackie in the GT40. They didn't actually finish, got to say. The winner was Ken Miles, who shared that car with Lloyd Ruby, in the Ford GT1X, which was the Spider version of the GT40. First time that car had been seen. And it's a Shelby American entered car, but in red and white of Bruce McLaren's race teams. And Bruce's Can-Am car was finished in the same red. And that car was built by Bruce McLaren, designed by Bruce's design team and Bruce himself. He created that car in his new race shop in Feltham near Heathrow Airport. Not a lot talked about with this car because simultaneously he just finished he's working on his 1966 3-litre Formula One car, the first ever McLaren Formula One car. But there he was also doing this car. And it won the Sebring 12 Hours, which is amazing, really. He built the car, and it was sent over to Shelby American, and they ran it. P2 went to the Holman Moody Ford GT Mark II, driven by Mark Donoghue, Walt Hansgen. Another dream combination, two fabulous drivers. But Dan Gurney had a close race with Ken Miles before he retired in his car, to the point where Carroll Shelby, who was entered both cars in the centre there, had to come out and wave his fist at both of them, get them to slow down and not race one another. Wonder if we're going to see Zak Brown doing that shortly in the middle of various Grand Prix, waving his fist over the pit wall at either Oscar or Lando. I doubt it, knowing Zach. But anyway, there's a nice picture of the Skip Scott Peter Revson SXY GT40. That's a 4.7 litre, which is basically the production version by then, because the race cars, the Shelby American cars, the Ford Advanced Vehicle cars were 7 litres. But if you were a private entrant and you bought one of these and you were running them as a separate team like SXY, then it was a 4.7 litre. But what a driver pairing. Skip Scott, Peter Revson. They finished third at Sebring that year. Very, very nice car. I put this in because it's just a reminder of what racing was like back then. This is the advertisement for the WD&HO Wills Trophy, it's a cigarette brand, obviously, at Silverstone Easter Monday. Fairly low-key, the advertisement. No mention of drivers, anything like that. Guess what? Denny Hulme won that race, the GT race, in the Sid Taylor GT40. And Denny Hulme, at that point, was already winning Grand Prix and would go on to be world champion in 1967. Not even mentioned in the ad. Doesn't say featuring Denny Hulme. Anyway, those are the days. I put this in because this is just GT40 folklore. It's Giancarlo Fisichella at the wheel of one of the very few road-going GT40s built. This one, I think, was built for Walter Hayes at Ford, and he ran it for a while. It had a sort of elongated back with some luggage space in the back. It was very nice inside. I took that picture, and you can see it's quite a spacious car. And there's me. I've got some GT40 history as well. There's me sitting in the Peter Sutcliffe Frank Matic GT40 owned by Peter Sutcliffe after the Surfers Paradise 12 Hours 1966 crossed the line first. It was later penalised and the win was given to Jackie Stewart's Ferrari. Only race Jackie ever won in a Ferrari. And of course he'd been racing the GT40 at Sebring, so he's all over the place. But anyway, I was part of the team looking after that car at the 66 Sydney Motor Show. Had to keep everybody away from it. Of course, I spent all my time sitting in the car pretending to be a racing driver. So there I am, dark green Peter Sutcliffe GT40, lovely car. And so we come to the three REC watches that commemorate the three of the great GT40 teams. First, Shelby American, which is that blue, beautiful face on the watch. Second, Essex Wire, Peter Revson, Skip Scott. You see the white there. And thirdly, the green of Sid Taylor Racing, Denny Hulme winning that race at Silverstone. And you can buy all three of those watches, and those watches contain metals, aluminium from components from GT40s raced by all three of those teams. Anyway, back to Bahrain. I keep looking at my phone to see if a decision has come in from the FIA about George Russell. It hasn't yet. Hoping. Meanwhile, infringements for Carlos Sainz and for Liam Lawson causing accidents. As I say, there was a lot of that going on in the midfield in Bahrain in those sort of DRS trains. And it's a case of DRS almost doubling back on itself and making it impossible to overtake. I won't go on about it, but I am going to do a piece about DRS soon and a video, so watch this space on that one. So big thanks to Jetcraft, to OEM Exclusive, and to Track Ninja, and of course to REC Watches for their support of this channel, without whom we wouldn't be able to do what we're doing. And thanks to you for watching. Back again next week, Saudi Arabia. Guess what? Another DRS race with lots of straights and overtaking. Can't wait. See you then.